The Boxcar Children, Blue Bay Mystery by Gertrude Chandler Warner. Chapter 1. Plans. One winter day, Jessie Alden met her brother Henry in the hall. She said, "Henry, I think Grandfather is up to something. Violet thinks so too." "What do you mean, Jessie?" said Henry. "Do you mean business trouble?" "Oh, no, not at all," said Jessie. "I think he is planning something. He jokes with Benny all the time, and he smiles to himself when he thinks no one is looking." Henry said, "I hope he is happy. What else have you noticed?" "Last night Grandfather was at the telephone in the hall. When I came down the stairs, he stopped talking suddenly. Then the other day a strange man came to see him. He was a very big, strong man. I could hear his deep voice. He laughed all the time. Jolly, you know." "Grandfather laughed a lot too," said Jessie. "Maybe you are right," said Henry. "I'll keep my eyes open too. He will tell us if there is anything he wants us to know." Henry did watch his grandfather after all. It was true, Mr. Walden seemed very happy. Once he started to say something, then he stopped. Then at last one day in January, the same man came to call. Mr. Alden took him into the front room and shut the door. He took the stranger's hat and coat and hung them up. He gave him an easy chair. The four Aldens would have been surprised to hear what their grandfather then had to say to the stranger. He said, "My grandchildren love to see new places. They love adventure. They love boats. Henry is the oldest, and he and Jessie go to high school. Violet comes next, and Benny is the youngest." The man smiled. "So they all like adventures," he said. "Yes, but best of all, they like to make something of nothing. Do you understand what I mean?" "Yes, sir, I understand." "Very well, Mr. Alden. I understand because I am just like that too. I like to find a fine fish pole out of stick and string and a bent pin. I like to make a plate out of a flat stone." "That's exactly right, Lars," cried Mr. Alden. "You do understand." Lars thought for a minute. Then he went on. "I think you want your grandchildren to have an exciting time, but you don't want them in any real danger." "Right again," said Mr. Alden. "Shake hands, Lars, and now I'll call them. You can watch them when I tell them." Mr. Alden opened the door and shouted, "Benny, get Henry and Jessie and Violet, all of you come down. I want to tell you something." The four Aldens were soon in the front room. "Jessie, Violet, Henry and Benny, this is Lars Larsen," said Mr. Alden, smiling. "He is your friend from now on." Lars shook hands with them all. He said, patting the dog as everyone else sat down, "And this is Watch. I know him too." Grandfather said, "Now I'm going to tell you about a plan." "I told you Grandfather was up to something," said Jessie. "Did you, my dear?" said Mr. Alden. "Well, we are all going on a trip. Lars is going with us. He has already been where we want to go, so he can tell us all about it." "How are we going on a trip?" asked Benny. "On a plane? On a ship?" "Both," said Mr. Alden, smiling. "And where?" asked Benny. "We are going to an island in the South Seas," said his grandfather. "Oh, boy!" cried Benny. "I'll tell you all about it," said Mr. Alden. "I have to go to San Francisco on business, and I thought it would be fun for you to go with me." Then suddenly one of my business friends said his company's ship was going to Tahiti at about that time, and did we want to go along? We would be the only passengers, so I said yes. "So we are going to Tahiti?" said Henry. "No," said Grandfather. "My friend told me about his first mate, Lars Larsen. 3 years ago, Lars was shipwrecked on a beautiful island in the South Seas. The ship hit a reef and 2 men were lost. One of them was Lars. He doesn't look lost." No, the two men landed on this beautiful island in a lifeboat. The others were picked up by other ships. Lars and the other man lived on the island until a ship came and picked them up too. Lars has told me all about the beautiful island. It is very safe, for nobody lives there. There are no dangerous animals, there is water, enough food to live on, and Lars would like to go there again for a vacation. And we're going to this island? Asked Violet softly. Right, said Mr. Alden. The Tahiti ship will take us there and come and get us on the way back. Oh, what a wonderful idea, cried Jessie. We do love to see new places. And we love ships, said Henry. You know that, Grandfather. Yes, and who else do you think is going? Asked Mr. Alden with a laugh. I don't know, said Jessie, laughing too. We never could guess. Mike, said Grandfather. Mike, yelled Benny. Oh boy, my old friend Mike Wood. I would like that best of anything in the world. Mike and I could have a neat time. We're just the same age. Henry said, this is such a grand surprise. You say we are going to fly? Yes, we will fly from here to New England to Chicago. We will pick up Mike there and go on to San Francisco. Then we will take the ship. But what about school? Asked Henry. Benny shouted, oh, we stay out of school? That will be cool. You can tell our teachers that we are going to the South Seas, Grandfather. Henry said, everyone in your school will know about the South Seas in just one day, Ben. Mr. Alden laughed too. He said, let me tell you about school. I began this plan a long time ago. I talked with your teachers. They gave me all your lessons until you came back. Do we have new school books? Asked Jessie. Mr. Alden smiled and said, yes, the books are right on the table. He gave each one a paper book. Henry's was dark green, with Henry on the cover in gold. There was a violet book with Violet on the cover, a blue book for Jessie, and a bright red one for Benny. Better not look at them now, said Mr. Alden. They are very interesting. Every day on the boat you will study these books. A boat school, Benny, said Jessie. She was afraid Benny would not like this. A boat school, cried Benny. That will be fun. But we won't have school on the island, will we, Lars? There will be no time, my lad, said Lars. You will be busy finding something to eat. That will be school enough. How about a lesson right now? A boat is not a ship. A boat can be carried on a ship. Our ship is too big to be carried by another. Oh, I get it, said Benny. Then we'll call the school a ship school. Almost, Benny, said Lars. A sailor would say ship's school. That's neat. Ship's school. Is the island beautiful, Lars? Asked Jessie. Palm trees and everything? Oh, yes, said Lars. That's why I want to see it again. I'm glad to spend my vacation there with you. We can go fishing too. Fishing, said Henry. Benny and I love to fish. And Mike. Mike loves to fish too, said Benny. Good old Mike, I can't wait to see him. Grandfather, you know it's awfully hard for me to wait for anything. When are we going? Next week, said Mr. Alden laughingly. I know you can't wait. You can't ever wait, so that's why I didn't tell you before. We'll have to pack soon, said Jessie. No, that's another thing, said Mr. Alden. He looked at Jessie, the perfect housekeeper. You see, you will need other clothes for the ship, and still others for the island. It is very hot there, so your cousin Alice packed your summer clothes, and they have gone already. You will find them on the ship. What a grandfather, said Henry. Can Watch go? Asked Benny. Sorry, my boy. Let me tell you about Watch, began Mr. Alden. And now I know he can't, said Benny. No, he can't, said Mr. Alden. Watch wouldn't like the plane or the boat or the island, really. Mr. and Mrs. McGregor need a watchdog, and we don't. Mike can't take Spot either. That's good, said Benny. No dogs at all. You can't go, Watch. Watch has gone to sleep on my foot, said Lars. That means he likes you, said Jessie. I'm glad of that, said Lars. Watch lifted his head. Lars patted him and said, Goodbye, I have to go now, Watch. Yes, Lars has work to do, said Grandfather. We will meet you again in San Francisco. They were all sorry to see Lars go. He was already a good friend. When Lars had gone, Henry looked at Jessie and Violet and said, Aren't we lucky to have a grandfather who takes us on a trip and helps us to go to school just the same? Jessie smiled at her brother. She said, I was thinking the same thing. What a lot of surprises Grandfather thinks of. But nobody knew then what the biggest surprise was going to be. Not even Grandfather, not even Lars. Chapter 2. Getting Ready. The next week soon came and the Olden family sat eating breakfast. Mr. Olden said, You will not go to school today, for we leave tomorrow. You have many things to do. What? Asked Benny. Grandfather laughed. He said, For one thing, Benny, look under your chair. Benny turned upside down and looked. Oh boy, he cried. He pulled out a little bright red suitcase. Henry looked under his chair. He pulled out a green suitcase just like Benny's. Jessie laughed. She knew what she would find. She did find a pretty blue suitcase, and Violet found a violet one. From you, Grandfather? Asked Violet. No, they are not, said Mr. Alden. Your cousin Alice and Joe sent them to you. You will each need a small bag for the trip. What about old Mike? Well, old Mike has one too, said Mr. Alden, smiling. His is dark red and yours is bright red. I hope you boys won't fight over them. Oh, no, said Benny. We never really fight. We just have fun. I can always tell mine because I like bright red. It is like the firehouse. You can tell yours because it says BA on it, said Ben. Probably Mike's has MW on it. Yes, that is so, said Mr. Alden. Today you can pack the bags. Put in only what you really need. Our books for one thing, said Jessie. I can hardly wait to see what is in that new school book. Yes, said Mr. Alden. He looked at Jessie and Henry. Those books are really wonderful. I think your first lesson should be a letter to your teachers. You can say thank you for all their hard work. Then later you can thank them again when you see the books. What about Mike's writing too? Asked Benny. Look here, old fellow, cried Henry. You worry too much about Mike. I think he ought to do what we do, said Benny. Grandfather patted Benny's shoulder. You may be sure he will, Benny, he said. Mike and I have been writing letters to each other for a long time. I thought I saw Mike's writing, said Benny. I saw it just yesterday when I gave you the mail. That's right, said Mr. Alden. Mike is packing his red suitcase this very day. Then, when we land at Chicago, Mike will be there waiting. It was very exciting to take the plane. It was a jet. Stairs were put in place against the airplane door. The Aldens went up the stairs with their bags. The first time we ever went on a plane, cried Benny to the stewardess. She laughed. You'll like it, she said. Mr. Alden had been on a plane many times. He could answer all Benny's questions. At last the plane rose in the air. They were off. I bet old Mike will be scared, said Benny. We'll soon see, said Mr. Alden. We will see Mike in just a short while. When the plane started to go down, they all looked out of the windows. Suddenly Violet said, There's Mike with his dark red bag. He doesn't look scared at all, said Jessie. And do try to be nice to him, Benny. Oh, of course I will, said Benny. He'll love this jet. I'll tell him it will say whoosh, and we'll be there. Mike was delighted to see Benny again. The two boys sat together and talked all the time. Mr. Alden had a seat to himself and slept. Did you get a school book, Mike? Asked Benny. Yes, I have it right in my new bag. Your grandfather asked my teacher to write it for me. It has lots of pictures in it too. There. You looked, Mike? Grandfather said not to look until we were on the boat. Careful, Ben, said Henry. I didn't look very much, said Mike. I just saw one picture of a big fish. A fish? Said Benny. What's a school book? What a school book? I suppose mine is different. Soon they had lunch. Then the plane began to go down again. So many exciting things, said Jess. We don't have time to think. You'll have plenty of time when you get on the ship, said Mr. Alden. Jessie was right and Mr. Alden was right. They landed. They said goodbye to the stewardess. Mr. Alden got a car to take them to the ship. The ship's name was the Sea Star, and they were soon on it. Here we are, said Mr. Alden, and there is your friend Lars. Lars was in uniform. You look different, Lars, said Benny. Yes, my lad, I'm a sailor now. I'm still first mate on this ship until we get to the island. This is Captain Brown. The captain shook hands with them all. He seemed to know all their names. This ship is very big, isn't it, grandfather? Said Benny. Grandfather laughed. Yes, he said. It is not a passenger ship, it's a big freighter, but it's very clean and very safe, and it will take us where we want to go. Not many ships can do that, for very few ships go to that island. What a beautiful desert island, Captain, said Mike. Oh, we want to go to a beautiful desert island, Captain, said Mike, and that's where we will take you, said Captain Brown. You are the only people on the ship except the crew. Lars will show you where you eat and sleep. The boat rocked gently at the dock. Jessie and Violet had one very small room. Benny and Mike had another very small one. Henry and Mr. Alden each had a room to himself. We can take only 8 people, said Lars. The cargo takes up a lot of room on the ship. There was still room on deck for 7 long chairs. Soon there were 6 people in the chairs. The men shouted and threw the ropes over on the deck. The freighter began to move. Here we go, sang Benny and Mike together. They were chugging under the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge into the great Pacific Ocean. Chapter 3. Ship's School. Seagulls flew after the boat, screaming. The cook threw out food for them. They screamed louder and louder. More and more came until there were hundreds. Aren't they beautiful? Cried Jessie. She went over to look. A big gull landed on the rail near her. They are such a lovely grey colour. How long will this trip be, Captain? Asked Henry. About 2 weeks, said Captain Brown. Then we'll put the family off at the island and the Sea Star will go on to Tahiti. Who is the family? Asked Mike. Am I in the family? Of course, said Benny. I wouldn't go without you, would I? Then the Sea Star will come back for us, Henry went on. Right, you will be alone on the island with Lars for 2 or 3 weeks. I understand that's what you want. Yes, said Jessie. We love to live like that. We like to find our own food and dishes, and we love to explore. The sun came then. It was beautiful. The whole sky was red and pink and violet. We never saw anything like that at home, Violet said. It was beautiful after the sun went down. The sky was black, but the stars were wonderful. Benny said, I never really saw the stars before. I didn't know they were so bright. The captain said, you can see the same stars here that you can see at home. Later you will see stars you never saw before. I will show you the Southern Cross. Everyone was tired. They slept well all night. The next morning after breakfast a bell rang. What's that? Asked Mike. It sounds like a school bell. I think it is a school bell, said Henry, laughing. Look at Grandfather. He is ringing it. Mr. Alden said, School will begin at 9 o'clock every day. You can sit in your chairs and get your lessons. You will find things you need in this box. In the box were pens, pencils, paints, and all kinds of paper. Jessie opened her blue book. Well, well, she said, here is lesson 1 about gulls and stars and fish. That's the picture I saw, cried Mike. It's a flying fish. Soon everyone was busy reading. After a while, Violet got up. She took a box of paints out of the box. She began painting a picture of a seagull. Henry soon began making a picture of a Big Dipper in the black sky. The boys drew pictures of flying fish. A whale, called Lars. Everyone rushed to the whale. It is very near, shouted Mike. Look at that tail. There he goes, spouting water, said Henry. A lot of water rose in the air. Then came the porpoises. There are about 200 of them, said Lars. They swim in a long line like that every day. They go over to one beach to eat fish and come back every night. Just see them roll around, said Mike. Are they round? No, you'll find a picture of them in your book, said Mr. Alden. I think that is in lesson 2. So it was every minute. The children saw something new, and then they always found a picture of it in their books. I told you they were wonderful books, said Grandfather. There is a lesson about the radio room. You will like that. Bill in the radio room will show you the radar tomorrow. The next day the children saw every part of the ship. They knew every sailor on the Sea Star. They had school every day. One morning the family could not see land any more. The bell rang for ship's school, and soon the 5 children were studying. Henry went to the rail and looked down. Now this is interesting, he cried. Come and look. They all saw a long white bag. The ship was pulling it through the water. What is that thing? Said Mike. It is a piece of cloth made into a net, said Henry. It catches plankton. What is plankton? Asked Mike. It is made up of tiny, tiny animals and fish eggs and seaweed, said Henry. Some of it is too small to see, but whales live on it. Jessie said, I've heard about that. I heard that we could feed the whole world on plankton if we wanted to. Why don't we? Asked Benny. People don't like it, said Jessie. Mike said, maybe somebody will find how to make it taste good. Maybe I will when I grow up. Good old Mike, said Benny. Maybe you will. I'd like to see what is in that net. The children looked up. Mars was coming. He said, if you come below, we will pull in the net. Can we see the things inside? Asked Mike. Some of them, said Lars, but some are too small to see. We have a microscope, which is fun to look into. Isn't this exciting? Cried Mike. He ran down the stairs. A sailor had pulled in the net and let the plankton run out into a big tub. The plankton was very bright coloured. In the dark ship it shone like red fire. Beautiful, said Violet. How awful it smells, said Mike. Just a good old fish smell, said Benny. You'll have to learn to like fish, Mike. Oh, there's a tiny crab, cried Mike. I can see right through him. And that's a tiny little fish, cried Violet. And pink seaweed and green seaweed. Mr. Alden had the microscope. He put it on the table. Then he gave Henry a piece of glass. Get some of the plankton on that glass, he said. It was exciting when the glass went under the microscope. Henry had the first look. After all, it's Henry's lesson, said Benny. They took turns. There were many tiny eggs and weeds and fish that they could not see without the microscope. Mike said, so tiny. Tiny animals, tiny everything. And to think, this is what whales eat. They grow big enough. Benny said, and now we all know Henry's lessons. That's grandfather for you. He thought this ship's school. The next day they all learned Violet's lesson. At first the school was very quiet. All were studying. Violet surprised them. She was excited about something. She said, "Listen, everyone, listen to this. You've all heard of Captain Cook." "Oh, yes," said Mike. "He was the man who found hundreds of islands on his sea trips." "Yes, Mike," said Violet. "That's what I thought. I thought it was all he did. I can hardly tell." "Take it easy, Violet," cried Henry. "You've got lots of time. What else did your Captain Cook do?" "Thanks, Henry. It was really more important than finding islands. He found vitamin C long before anyone knew what it was. Listen to this. On every long sea trip, more than half of every crew died of scurvy. Captain Cook thought they had scurvy because they had nothing to eat but salted meat and crackers. So he made every sailor eat sauerkraut and onions every day. They also had to eat a kind of syrup made of lemons and oranges. That wouldn't be too bad. No, but some sailors didn't like sauerkraut or onions or lemons, and still they had to eat them. You see, they got vitamin C without knowing it. Even Captain Cook didn't know what vitamin C was. He just knew people didn't have scurvy if they ate sauerkraut and oranges." "I suppose that's why we drank orange juice every day," said Mike. "Exactly right, Mike," said Violet. Then when Captain Cook got home after 3 years at sea, he had lost only one man. "I bet that man wouldn't eat his sauerkraut," said Benny. "I bet so too," said Mike. Henry and Jessie looked at Violet. They both were thinking, "I never heard Violet talk so much." But Violet went right on. "Then another thing," she said. "Once he was sailing through cakes of ice very far south, and he found that when he melted a cake of ice, it was fresh water." "That's funny," said Henry. "I always thought salt water would freeze into salt ice. Then it would melt back into salt water." "It doesn't though," said Violet, laughing. "Everyone else thought so too. They didn't even try. Oh, Captain Cook was such a very smart man and so brave. You all ought to read my book." "I think so too, my dear," said Mr. Alden. "I'd like to read it myself." Day after day the Sea Star went along through the purple sea. It had been going for almost 2 weeks. Mike said, "My, I'm hot, but I like it hot." Lars said, "We are almost there, Mr. Mike. I think we had better get ready for our island."